Hi, it is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, and this is Writing Wednesday. It was postponed. I had some family stuff come up earlier today. So this is Janet Fitch, and I'm doing my Writing Wednesday now instead of at noon. So anyway, this is where I answer your writing questions. You can put them in the comments. You can, if you ever have a question during the week, you can send it to me in my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I will answer your writing questions. I can do a whole Writing Wednesday around your question. But here we are, and it was thunder and lightning last night, and it it's a wonderful time whenever there's exciting environmental stuff to take a moment and see if you can capture it in words. Writing is just observing and then finding the language to express what you are seeing. And I read an interesting piece in Mary Gaitskill's Substack this week, and I think I can link to it in comments about description, that Mary Gaitskill is concerned with writers, the lack of description in current writing, and why people are having such a hard time describing things or even understanding why you would take the trouble to describe things. Students are oddly resistant at the moment to description. It's kind of a missing link, and anybody who's worked with me knows that I am a huge champion of writing about the physical world and using the senses and directly engaging with the world. I think we are spending way too much time on screens in denatured environments, and it's actually driving people a little crazy, because we are, what is it, a million years of evolution in the body to apprehend and process central information, physical information. And the fact that in a generation or two we become so divorced from our physical life, it doesn't mean that people aren't hungry for it. People are craving it. They're craving it. And I think we're all getting a little bit we're kind of getting crazy because we are not responding to our need for sense information, to be in touch with the senses and in touch with the physical world. And many people, are so deep, they're so deep into contemporary life and the speed of contemporary life and the divorce from the physical, that it's up to writers to take on that challenge, to try to kind of reunite the human being, your reader, with the sensual world around them. It was something that I was really amazed at when White Oleander came out, 20 years ago now. That people said, I hadn't really bothered to take a look at the color of my son's eyes, or what the sky looked like. It never occurred to me until I read your book, and that was exciting, to be able to put people back in touch with their own abilities to be in the world, to apprehend physical reality, and the excitement of that, and the excitement of being able to describe the world we live in. I urge you to read her essay. So if you even look up Mary Gaitskill's Substack, Physical Reality, I guess. She had talked to a couple of other writers who were kind of off the cuff. It wasn't, a formal discussion, so maybe their reaction wasn't as thoughtful as it could have been. But they were just saying people are over it. They don't want to see pages and pages of description of landscape and what's out the window. A driving trip, like I guess the example was Updike, who was a beautiful writer of the physical world and describing like driving a car through the countryside and describing what's out of the window. Well, maybe people's attention span has been shortened a bit. They might not want pages and pages of description of what's passing by, but everybody wants some. They want to breathe in that country air. They want to see what's in the distance, what's close by, cattle leaning over a fence, or I don't remember what book she was particularly talking about. But I'm of the opinion that your reader not only needs it, not only wants it, to a certain degree. I mean, it shouldn't preclude the drama of whatever is going on. But I think that we are, this is a million years in the making, this apparatus. And to think that in, a generation or two, we're going to suddenly evolve to a place where it no longer matters to the human being where they are, the sensual world, what they're apprehending, what is outside. Outside the window is not just outside the window; it's the world. It's the actual world. I don't think we are beyond that. I urge you, even if you are a mind to write in dramatic scenes first, you write the drama, the interpersonal conflict in the scenes, which, of course, I'm a big advocate of. But to make sure that these are real people in the body, in a real world, part of the real world, to think that we can do without that is, I think that's, then things become thinner and thinner and thinner. Yeah, we can get by on thinner gruel, thinner gruel, thinner gruel, but why would you want to? I think that the best writing always deals with the senses, deals with the physical world, and the challenge is to describe it. And I think that there's a generation who hasn't been challenged to do that in their creative writing classes. They just allow, nobody says, what time of day is it? What's the light like? What ambient sounds are here? What are they hearing, close up? What are they hearing far away? How hot is it? What plants are growing out there? We lose and lose and lose as we start to denature life. And then people just don't understand why they're so restless and so anxious and feeling so removed from the world. And I think that it's because of the divorce from sensual reality and from, people saying it doesn't matter. Gateskill is quite upset about this, and rightly so. I mean, she can really describe things. She's gives you the world without, without neglecting the dramatics of interpersonal conflict and the inner world. But the outer world is as important as the inner world. We are still not brains in jars. We're still not, on our way to Jupiter. And even if we were, we'd spend so much time on the holodeck just trying to not become insane. Let's give our reader the physical world and start healing them, putting them back in touch with the world as it is. And it shouldn't be just nonfiction writers that do that. Fiction creates a world, and part of the world is sensual world, the physical reality. So I urge you to take a look at that Gate Skill article, and challenge yourself to see something. Like a big thunderstorm last night was just incredible, and the breadth of the sound, the way it clapped out and then rolled and shook the house. I could hear cracking in the house, which it was a very close by, and counting the distance, between the light flash and the thunder. Heidi saying, I wonder if it isn't due to the abandoning of literature for stories on screens where all you have is sight and sound. I think it's life on the screen. Yeah, it's life on the screen, and people not paying attention to their own physical reality. It's too much screen as a substitute for reality. When I teach my writing from the senses class, I talk about an encounter I had with a little kid, who we were talking about, that would they want to go to the zoo and see the elephant? And the kid was like, I've seen an elephant. I was like, oh, you have? Where did you see the elephant? I was like, oh, I saw an elephant on television. Not just unaware that an elephant on the television and the elephant being in the presence of an elephant are two very different experiences. In one, the elephant is 6 inches high, flat, a shape moves, some sort of narration, but an elephant in physical reality is 8 feet high, weighs, several tons. The skin up close looks, like the moon. It's leathery, and they have his hairs, and not only that, it smells, and there's a presence and an intelligence, and you're looking at the elephant's looking at you. It uses all the senses. It is a big experience, and we're used to seeing experience in these little frames. And of course, the fiction that comes out of just regurgitation of flat, moderated experience is not going to be as rich as apprehended by a writer who is living in the physical world and able to look at physical phenomena and find language to describe it. My daughter went hiking in Utah, Green Mesa, and got to the top of Green Mesa at sunset, and it's that landscape just folded and sculpted, and millions of years of erosion, and it's quite impressive. And they get to the top, and they're looking out at this folded landscape, and one of the other kids says, there are no words, or maybe it was a counselor, said there are no words to describe this. And my daughter said, oh yes, there are. There are words to describe this. You don't have them. Because it takes a lot of work to get the descriptive power to be able to describe a complicated landscape if you can't describe a mockingbird on a branch, or you can't describe, a summer shower. Then you're not even used to accessing language, that kind of language, to describe physical phenomena. And you have to start collecting that stuff. And that's when I talk about keeping the writer's notebooks, sense impressions, because there's first just noticing, getting out from behind the screens and going out in physical reality. And then the next step is having the language, having that power. It doesn't come all at once. You have to train. You have to develop that ability. And so as writer, I challenge you to get outside, open the windows anyway. And, if there's some kind of bold physical phenomenon, like a big thunderstorm, to take 10 minutes, take 15 minutes, take a half an hour, and really try to find the language to describe what you're seeing. Rather than just like labeling big thunderstorm. Well, what is a big thunderstorm? What is it like? Well, first of all, it got me out of bed, probably threw me out of bed. Um, it was such a big sound, so wide, it filled the entire valley. Live on kind of a hillside with a big valley in front. It definitely filled the valley. It shook the house. It, what are those sounds of the clouds colliding? What does that sound like? So you're always looking for verbs and ways to break down this kind of unified, knit together phenomenon and pull it apart. And what aspects can I talk about? I could talk about what it's like in the night to have that kind of sound. The cat, scurrying under the bed, didn't come out all day. Is it exciting? Is it terrifying? Is it, what adjectives would you give it? What kind of verbs would you use? And really take the time. Otherwise, you're left just when something happens or when you see something, you say, palm tree, but you can't really you don't have the language yet to describe the effect of the boiling white cloud behind the palm tree and the lighting effects on the edges of the fan. It takes time. It takes time and practice, just like a pianist playing scales. This is like writers playing scales. And so it's not, I don't think it's laziness exactly. I think it's not even understanding that this is something that you need to be able to do. Once you understand that this is something you need to be able to do as a writer, then that's a challenge, and some people will accept the challenge, and some people will just go, I can get away without it. But your work will be thinner, not as rich in experience as it would be if you had the sensual world in there. So I am open to questions today. So Barry says Kate Bush, The Sensual World, and had a link for YouTube. That's in the comments. That'll be neat to take a look at. And if anybody can find that Mary Gateskill Substack link, and if you can't, I'll find it and I'll put it in the comments. All right, well, we have questions today, so let me take a look at them. But please, if you have questions, go ahead and throw them into the comments, and I'm happy to answer them. Here's an interesting question that just about everybody will be familiar with who has attempted to write a novel. I have a tendency to lose interest in the stories and characters I'm writing before I finish. How do I get and stay emotionally attached to them? I mean, that is something that everybody has experienced. The feeling of being 80 pages, 100 pages, 200 pages, first draft, second draft, into a novel, and just losing interest. Maybe you have even another idea for another book as you're working on this one, and you're losing interest in this one. And you'll find generally, and tell me if I'm wrong, guys, you will find that if you give up the book you're writing and start writing that other book that suddenly seems very attractive, the same thing will happen. Because it's a level, it's a part of the whole process to fall in love with your work again when you've lost touch with the characters, when you've lost touch with the excitement and why you wanted to write the book in the first place. So what I find is very, very helpful when this happens to you is, first of all, often you've reached the end of what you know about the character. So it's a really good time to stop and see what else you don't know. See what you don't know about your character. I use that Lagos Egri three-dimensional character study that I've shown you many a time. It's from The Art of Dramatic Writing, where you ask your character, you find out about elements of their life that you didn't know, their sociology, psychology, and their physical being, were they sick a lot as a kid? Were they healthy? Were they forced to go to school sick? Do they have scars? Did they have a big illness as a kid? These are physical things that you might not have known about your character. They have allergies. They were sick a lot and nobody really cared, and they sent them to school sick, and this certain kind of family. What were their favorite subjects in school? Something you don't even think about. What are their spiritual feelings? It doesn't have to be a spiritual novel, but it's interesting to know. Do they believe that there's sense to the world, or we're just thrown in here and stuff happens randomly and we do the best we can, piece by piece? How do they have a system of moral values or not? What do they believe? What would they die for? So often it's about reattaching yourself to the character by finding out more about the character. And sometimes it helps to imagine interviewing another character about your, especially protagonist. Often it takes a while to get to know them. It might be a couple of years to really understand the protagonist, because if you're a point of view character, you're looking at everybody else through their eyes, but you're not necessarily, it's hard to turn it around. And what do people think of your character? What do they think of the protagonist? A childhood friend, a teacher, what does the teacher think of your character? What does their therapist think of them? What does their boss think of them? Look at the other characters. Another thing that is helpful is to stay emotionally attached to the work, is to perhaps do a chapter in a different voice, maybe from a different point of view. Certainly going from first person to third person can give you insight, even if you end up switching back the other way, or from third person to first person. You can get a lot of information about the character that way. You can try something, stylistically interesting, and see if you get reattached that way. You can go back to books, certain writers certain books, certain characters that always make me want to write. And I will go back to those books. I will pick up something and read, maybe just a chapter, and it excites me again about my own writing and puts me back in touch with my own creative impulse. So I'm not just kind of raking the coals this way and this, the gravel. I'm not just raking things in different directions, but it puts me back in touch with my own creative life. So that's another thing, to get and stay emotionally attached to your work. Notice when you describe it to someone, what do you end up describing about your book, and notice that this whole, maybe this whole huge subplot you thought was so important, you never actually describe that when you're describing the book. You usually describe what the central thing is, and maybe you will go back and start picking up that central story again. That puts you back in touch with interest. But no, instead of abandoning the book, that's what I'm trying to say. Instead of abandoning the book for something else that you're more excited about, to go in and find that place of attachment again, because it will happen again. It will happen with the next story as well. It's part of the process that it's like a long marriage, that you fall out of love with that person, you forget, you're just kind of on parallel courses, and then something happens and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, you're so funny, or you're so sweet when things are down, you're right there. It reminds you, well, that's the same thing with a long project, is you do have to face that there are going to be times where you're not feeling it anymore. And, to find the place where you went awry, maybe you introduced a direction that you took a wrong direction. You lost the central thread. You went off on, your character fell in love with some, is hot for somebody at work or something, and you're putting a lot of energy into that, and then it's like you've lost your central thread, and sometimes you have to tear that out or go back to where you were still excited about it. I've got to say, I'm probably, at least 4/5 of the way done with the first draft of the novel that I'm working on. And I just printed the whole thing out. And I'll read what I've got, and I guarantee you that there is too much subplot that isn't about the major issue. And it's something you start noticing as you get towards the end of the book, that because it's where you start tapering inwards, and you're starting to close it out. It's like, did all those subplots add something to the central story, or did they just keep branching out? In which case, I might have to eliminate, I might have to reshape so it comes back towards the central story. And find out more about the character, even towards the end of a draft. If you're losing your contact with the reason you're writing this thing, it's very helpful to find the places where you're in full contact, and you might just have to trim out the stuff that is taking you off of the central story. Rereading is good. Retyping, Christy is doing that. Let's see. It's a weird reset, as Christy is saying. Yeah, it is a reset. And very, very interesting. One thing that I did once, I had a computer die between drafts, and I had to retype the whole thing from a hard copy. And it was amazing what I left out, what turned out to not matter, because you create a lot of material not knowing whether you're going to need it or not. And then it's like, it turns out, that really never paid off. That subplot with, Ginny and the bunny, whatever, didn't really pay off. So we're going to cut that out and go back to where it was resonant and meaningful, and it seemed to be about what you set out for the thing to be about. 'Cause, Llewellyn says, I'm stuck right now. I've stopped to reconsider the catalyst character and his motivation. Sometimes it's amping up the antagonist, putting more pressure on the character is helpful. So that they're not going, should I act, shouldn't I act? It's like they have no choice, that this is something they have to deal with, and so they do. That can be, you can find out that your conflict isn't strong enough to motivate you to worry about your character. Heidi says, if I don't have a good sense of the scene I'm working on with a character, I feel unattached. Researching, reading gives helps me get into the scene and gives new fuel for ideas. Yeah. Researching, and it doesn't mean, going and reading 5 volumes of, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, or, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. It's sometimes it's just getting a little bit of clarity on something, like a paragraph sometimes, or a little bit of the historical period that is just like, oh my God, that I forgot that, about the 60s. I'm writing about the 60s, and that little bit that sends me back. Now I have just a little spark. This all you need is that little spark that sends you back. Let's see if there's anything. Here we go. Yeah. All right. And then the next question I have is an interesting novelist question of a very general nature. Somebody who wants to write a novel, has a plot and an idea, but doesn't know where to start or how to use writing style. So this is definitely a, first novel question of somebody who has an idea for a novel and a plot. So a plot meaning there's some element that they know what they want something to happen. So writing a novel, nobody writes a novel. This is just in general rule of thumb. Nobody writes a novel. You write a scene and you write another scene. And if you write a lot of scenes, and it has to be a real scene where somebody comes in one condition, leaves in another, or something has happened that they can't go back to the way it was before. That's a plot. So usually your character, you start with a character and a situation that puts pressure on who that character is. So if you have somebody who is a hardworking person who's spent a lot of time and effort in acquiring a certain amount of financial stability, and it's very important to them, well, then your plot would be what would put pressure on somebody like that is something happens where they lose their security. And it's very important to them. So they're going to work to deal with whatever the situation is. It puts pressure on who they are. And a good plot puts pressure on who the character is, what they want in life. Their very makeup. And where to start is I would start with the character before whatever happens to change the situation. So we get a little bit of who they are, and then bring in the element that puts pressure on their character. Seems to be a very good place to start. I believe in starting with start it as a short story and see if you can write it as a short story, and then see if it has the outward movement. Is that centrifugal force that pushes outwards, that makes the story is too big for a short story, that it wants to expand. There's more to say about this situation. And you have to really have, it has to be connected with who you are as an artist, as a writer, as a person. If it's connected with your own issues, your own inner issues, you will find it much more compelling. I say there are neck up stories and neck down stories. And neck up stories are, I have this really great idea, high concept idea, and I start writing it. But if it has no connection to who I am as a person and my own conflicts and my own anxieties and my own sense of the world, um, I'm not gonna be able to sustain that very well. I need to be invested on an unconscious level, that there's an exploration that I need to take because of my own personal issues. And so if I am expressing something that I care about on some deep level, something that I am, that's what I call a neck down story. So that's why I always like to start with these short exercises where you take a word and it's kind of a Rorschach. You take a word and you write a short based on your associations. You have associations with that word, and you take the one with the strongest associations and you write a short, and then you see whether there's energy there, and if there is, you take it to a longer story. If there's still more to say about it, then that's something that came out of you, so you'll be much less likely to fall out of attachment to it because it's yourself. Annie Dillard said the self is the paint box. The self is the bearer of the paint box of our inherited contents of obsessions and fascinations. Meaning, if you write out of what you are made of, your obsessions and fascinations, anxieties, the things that you care about, are interested in, want to play with, want to understand, you're going to be far more connected to your material and less likely to have the problem of losing interest in your work. But everybody loses interest in their work at a certain point or points in the process. So having written 5 novels now, published, plus a few for the drawer, now I recognize that this is part of the process, and I don't abandon the book just because I'm feeling like I'm not connected to it anymore. I am connected to it somehow, and I have faith in that, and I look for that. I look for that connection. I look for the place where I still feel it, and I still care, and I still care about writing, and I still am excited about the ideas. So I'll read, I have certain books that I go to. I'll read Lee Young Lee, The Winged Seed. I'll read some of that. I'll read some of The Lover by Marguerite Duras. I have certain books that I just keep on my shelf exactly like you'd keep the aspirin, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. It's just like my medicine chest. So when I flag, when I lose my confidence or my feeling of being an artist, or why am I doing this? I am so uncreative, and I just can't contact it. Then I'll read certain things, and not much. Maybe I just have to read a few pages, and once again that feeling comes back up. So, is there anything else I can talk about for you? I am getting ready to go up to. Oh, hi, MJ. Here it is. Hi, Janet. Perhaps tangentially related question. I'd love to hear your perspectives on how pacing and story might intentionally seem to go into a downshift. So, for example, Anna Karenina, I may be misremembering, but there were chapters in the middle that slow the drama away from Vronsky and Anna. So this is a storytelling. the method that certain books take, and Anna Karenina is one, is it has subplots that are like parallel subplots. So you can see different aspects of a problem, like a psychological problem, literary problem, sociological problem, as manifested in a couple of different lives. So Anna Karenina has, it actually has three stories. It has the story of Vronsky and Anna. This is a society woman who throws over her her life, her socially conventional life, for a great passion, a great love. Then there is the story of her brother, Stefan, who has an affair and threatens the life of his family when his wife discovers that he's had this affair. So it actually opens with him getting kicked out of the house because she's discovered his affair. And there is a third love story between a very emotionally conventional young man and the sister of the husband, the philandering husband, the sister of his wife's sister, who is she is a marriageable young woman, very nice, and this guy is kind of timid. And their relationship, because it begins, happy families are all alike, unhappy families are differ in their own way. So we have the possibility of a happy family forming. Then we have these two parallel stories of a woman and a man, Anna and her brother, doing basically the same thing, but it destroys the woman because she is so much more harshly judged, whereas a man is more free to stray and then return to the bosom of his family, And this was not something that Tolstoy intentionally decided that he wanted to show how women, really get screwed in our society. Actually, he started with a tale of an adulterous woman that he really despised, and that how she ends up a suicide. But because he is such an honest artist in creating this character, that he began to understand her more and more. She became more richer. She became more admirable, and so the tragedy that much more of a tragedy. So it doesn't necessarily, it does sort of downshift in the emotional intensity, because there's nothing as intense as Anna and Vronsky's relationship, or Anna's relationship to Vronsky, because Vronsky's a bit of an idiot. But women in love, if they're, the handsome idiot he doesn't understand why they're so tormented. It's like, but we don't really care that much about Vronsky's inner life. That's all Anna is what we care about. And Levin, who is the kind of the hesitant young man, let's say, he's very interested in the peasant question. Tolstoy was very interested in the peasant question and agriculture and peasant. He was very interested in education, but with Levin, he used agriculture and progress in agriculture and the emancipation of the serfs, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, every artist has a reason that they are writing the book. And the reader might not share their interest in agriculture or peasant education. Sophia Tolstoy's wife, told him to cut all that stuff. Nobody's going to care about agriculture. They're going to care about the love story. So, can we cut this shit? And but this was why Tolstoy was writing it. So there will be sometimes elements that are in there for you, that you want to write about something, and whether or not somebody else is going to want to read it, it's the thing that made you want to write the thing in the first place, and you might insist on including it whether or not the reader cares about that aspect of it, as long as there's enough of where the real drama is, where the story is. So yeah, haying, agriculture, sheep, all that stuff is slower, but it is the physical reality. Again, we're back to the physical world. It gives us the physical world of the time. And it is part of Tolstoy's connection to this story, part of the reason that he's writing it. And so I can say that as a reader, but also as a writer, that if there's some aspect of a story that you need to address, and it isn't the most interesting thing about the story, as long as you include what is the most interesting stuff, it provides a base note. It provides a kind of a matrix for the rest of the thing. And as long as you have it's like having we talked about this, about profluence. What keeps the reader reading? If you have something they're desperate to know, if you have them on the line, if you've ever gone fishing, if you have the hook well and sunk, you can go off on a tangent. We talked about Dostoevsky, which of the brothers killed the father in Brothers Karamazov? He can go just about anywhere he wants, because we still want to know which of the brothers killed the father. Or in Crime and Punishment, will Raskolnikov get caught? He can go off in any direction, and we can have, he doesn't talk about knitwear or something, but he could, because we still want to know, if he's going to get caught for killing the landlady. They always say that Dostoevsky tied a girl to the tracks in the first 50 pages of every book he wrote. So you just can't put it down, because you want to know what's going to happen. So you're allowed to have the slower pieces that you're interested in. And believe me, people will say, cut all that peasant stuff, we don't care. But if you care, and it keeps you hooked in to the material, you do need it. As a writer, you need it. I'd say, if it gets too slow and you lose your fish, then that's a different story, and you need to get that reader and keep them on the line. If they lose faith in you, if they think it's, oh God, it's all going to be about sheep and agriculture, you've lost your fish, and the reader's going to get away, and they're going to close the book. So it's always a sense of how much suspense have you already built in, and then you can back off a little bit, and the reader will stay with you. MJ says, yes, try not to lose the fish. Yes, absolutely. Yes, some readers might not remember that he finished the novel with Kitty and Levin pages after Anna dies. Yeah, so it's how you tell the story. How much leeway do you give yourself to digress? Will be based on how firmly your reader is invested in wanting to know something. If there's nothing that they really want to know, you cannot digress very much, because you haven't built up the suspense. So Heidi says, most of my writing deals with the same philosophical themes, loss of faith in religion. It makes up a lot of who I am as a writer, but I wonder if readers will be interested. It doesn't you have to believe that if it's something that is really important to you, that that's going to be what it's about. And some readers are going to like it and some readers aren't. But what else are you going to write about? You know, every writer worries about who's going to care about this. I always worry about that when I'm working on something. Um, I get to a certain point. Often it's when I finish it and I see it in galleys and I go, oh my God, who is going to care about this? And it's a lot of it is just that you're so familiar with it that you forget how much you've put into every sentence. That it's more alive and it's more powerful than you think it is. It becomes hard to see. So everybody wonders if the readers will be interested. Believe me, if you are interested and you really dig down into the subject and you really get it out there on the page, make people care. And you have to trust that. All right. Well, thank you for coming for a late Writing Wednesday. And feel free to send me questions on my webpage, janetfitchwrites.com. And we'll see you next week for Writing Wednesday. All right. Thank you. Bye.